Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope we had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I was so glad last week I had a chance to talk about Thanksgiving. It fit right into the what was going on. And I kind of got a suggestion of talking a little bit about um, relationship. And I thought that I would do it by telling you a story, a fairy tale, a once upon a time. And just to give you a kind of an interesting idea of how strange and wondrous life can be when you least expect it. There was a young woman, and she was divorced, and she had a son to raise. And it just so happened that she was working with a, a, a friend who said, I have someone I think it would be fun for you to meet. And she said, how about this 2 days after the 4th of July? And I thought, that's really, when I heard the story, I thought, well, that obviously she picked a good time, right? And it turns out that this woman's son was away at camp for the week, so she was free. And she didn't have to worry about getting a babysitter, so she said, yes, I'd love to. That would be fun. And she ended up getting on a train and going down toward Coney Island. And she waited a while and they talked. She talked with her friend and her friend's boyfriend, who also knew this young man and in fact was in college with him. So, it was kind of nice. I think she felt safe because she was being introduced by someone, people she knew. And I think she got tired of waiting and she said, well, what train is he coming off of? And she walked down and she stood there and she waited for him. Now remember, I'm telling you a fairy tale, right? And she had never met him. And this young man came down the subway stairs and she went up to him and said, did you bring the wine? And he had the bag and the bottle in it. And so they went off and went back to their friend's house and they spent the rest of the day together. And interestingly enough, they found that they had an awful lot in common. And from what I understand, they both loved to talk, and they did a lot of talking and shared, which was pretty interesting. He was younger than her by 4 years, and here she was with, she was 24, 20, almost 25, with a 9-year-old son. So, kind of was a little difficult, wondering how that they would carry the conversation with this difference between them. But he was going to school to be a teacher, so that was an opening. Then they talked and they talked and they talked about religion and politics and books that they liked to read and music that they liked. It was really amazing when I heard the story. I thought, boy, this really is a fairy tale, especially when they had been together all day and they spent some time together. He went home to feed the dog, from what I understand, and they saw each other the next day. So it looked like it was a nice relationship. Well, they were married 3 weeks later, and her friend was stood up for her, was a witness, and his other friend was also the witness. And I don't know how she could have done that. When you think about it, how do you marry someone, after 3 weeks? Hmm. Well, the interesting thing about that story is I got to know that this fairy tale lasted a long time. In fact, the fairy tale showed that while they continued to care for each other and go through hard times and work together, Um, they were together more than 54 years, still married, still friends, still sharing. And I thought that was pretty amazing. So, yesterday, when I read something about a karmic, what did I say? Well, the fact that they were seemingly drawn together. There was something about the relationship that just was. Now, at their 50th wedding anniversary, they had a lot of wonderful people there. Young people, old people that shared that day with them, and that was a lot of fun. And wrote a song, and she didn't want him to know about it, so she practiced in the car. Every time she got in the car, she practiced. And while the party was going on, she was walking around with this clipboard in her hand. Everyone thought she was taking attendance or something. But what it was is she had the words to the song on the clipboard and she was afraid she'd forget them. And their youngest son had set up a sound system and she got up and she sang the song to him. And in the song, she touched on the fact that people often said, "How did you know? How did you know?" Weeks. And she said, "You took my hand. You took my hand and you never let go." And that's exactly what he did. Now, I'm very lucky that in many ways, but I lived that fairy tale. And I never forget for a moment that it took work. That having a relationship, a loving, caring, growing relationship with someone that you don't know, is a stranger, really, and making it work um, requires awareness that there are differences and that we don't change other people. You've heard me say that before. I think what was the most amazing thing about the story is that he had to call his mother and father and tell them he was now married. I'd never met them. They were strangers to me. He was they had two sons, but he was a very special son to them. And when they went to visit them for the first time, his mother took me in her arms, and I'm so grateful that I could call her mom. Interestingly enough, too, it turned out that his mother and father had eloped. So I guess what didn't come as such a big surprise. And they had sent us a telegram wishing us many happy years, not having even known anything about me. So it was another fairy tale. Yeah. I think that's to be recognized that life is filled with wonder. And you never know from day to day who will be put in your life and why. So if you have an open mind and an open heart, you can live a fairy tale too. Thank you for letting me share that story. Be well.